Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 27th of January. But before that, a disclaimer. There has been no official Hindu newspaper released today. So this is from the e-copy of the Hindu, and all interested candidates who wish to read these articles can visit the Hindu website. So coming to the first article, Natural Partners in the Asian Century. The opinion is that there is a need for fresh perspective in India's China policy. Now, the context of this article is an analysis of the 21st century being an Asian century. It questions that is it really an Asian century, and if it has to realize this dream of becoming an Asian century, then what are the challenges and what should be done? So that is the gist of this particular editorial. Now, the first analysis with regards to is it an Asian century is an importance of size. Now, you need to understand that the previous centuries like the 19th century and the 20th century, countries like the UK, Germany, France, all these countries which were the European countries were largely dominating. And even in Asia, the countries like Japan was the most powerful. Now, these countries were relatively very much small in size compared to their influence. And this influence, the author analyzes, was largely because of technological advancements in these countries, which enabled these countries to dominate the entire world. Now, this scenario in the modern times has changed. Now, not only technological advancement is a key reason for dominance of a country, another aspect which has become important is the size of the country. For example, India and China, because of their sheer size, have huge markets. They have a huge human resource. So all of these are benefiting the growth of these countries, and as a result of which these countries are much more dominant in the global scenario today. So this is an analysis which has been drawn. So from this importance of size in the present era, definitely Asia is supposed to be the center of the 21st century, because not only does Asia have the largest of the countries, some of the largest countries, also Asia itself is the largest continent. So size being an important factor in determining power today. So definitely 21st century is an Asian century. So that is the analysis here. The second issue is with regards to some of the statistics which are highly in the favor of Asia being the center of the 21st century. Now, what are these statistics? First and foremost is that Asia accounts for half of the world's population. It accounts for half of the world's container traffic. It accounts for 1/3 of the bulk cargo of the world. It has 40% of the world's offshore oil reserves. So all of these statistics are in the favor of making Asia the key player in the 21st century, and indeed this century can be an Asian century. Also, if you will see from the economic perspective, a number of countries in Asia have huge growth rates. Many countries have growth rates greater than 7%, including India and China. And not only that, this growth rate is doubling every 10 years. So even from that economic perspective also, there is a huge scope for the century to be an Asian century. So that is the analysis. Another aspect is with regards to the defense capabilities. Now, this is an important analysis. You need to understand that two countries in Asia, that is India and China, are both nuclear capable. For that matter, even Pakistan is nuclear capable. But these are two huge countries which are nuclear capable. Another aspect is that one of the highest defense spending and prowess is seen in Asia. Also, the global power matrix has shifted from the previous focus on the Atlantic shore to now the Indo-Pacific region. And definitely, defense capabilities are at a show in Asia. So this is enabling Asia to make this century as the Asian century, because compared to the rest of the world, the defense capabilities of this region are something which are a huge deterrence and a huge ability in Asia. So that is one potential of Asia which makes it definitely one of the foremost contenders of the 21st century. So that is one analysis. Another thing is with regards to the importance of the Indian Ocean. Now, the Indian Ocean has at present become the epicenter of global power. Major countries are trying to dominate the Indian Ocean. Also, Indian Ocean is the spot where 80% of the world cargo travels as it passes through the Malacca Strait. So definitely the relevance of Indian Ocean in the present time is of utmost importance, and in this regard also this 21st century is an Asian century. So these are the points which are favoring the Asian century. Now, coming to the role of India and China in realizing the dream of an Asian century. Now, definitely both these countries are major and influential power hubs, and they're highly populous, and they have huge GDP numbers. So all of these are something that are favoring their contribution in making the 21st century an Asian century. But in this regard, there are some challenges which both these countries are facing. First is with regards to China. Now, China is definitely a rising global power, but it is not taking its role responsibly. For instance, China is dominating the other minor countries in Asia. Its assertive role on the South China Sea, also its role in the Indian Ocean, all of these are being viewed by the other Asian countries with skepticism, and even India is not willing to partner well with China. So in this regard, China is not championing the cause of ensuring that this 21st century becomes an Asian century is what has been analyzed here. Another analysis with regards to India and the challenges which India is having in realizing the dream of an Asian century are, first and foremost, is that India has not been focusing largely on becoming a global leader and is being limited to being a regional leader only. This is especially with regards to India's stand on Pakistan. Now here you need to understand that India has adopted a policy of isolationism against Pakistan. So what happens is that wherever India is going on international fora, it is trying to isolate Pakistan, and its focus is largely on demeaning Pakistan. So that is one analysis that has been given, that India's vision with regards to Pakistan is a highly myopic one, and India should need to focus more on global issues. And here the author says that if India is going to focus on global issues, then as a collateral benefit, Pakistan problem will itself get resolved. So India needs to take a greater analysis of the global problems. So that is an analysis with regards to the challenges which India is posing in the realization of the Asian century. Now, in this regard, definitely some suggestions have been given by the author, and this is an important analysis in the editorial. The first is with regards to the India-China partnership. Now, here the author says that for the Asian century to be realized, there is an utmost need for India and China to partner for this cause. Now, for this partnership, what is important is that the trust deficit which is there between both the countries, which is reflected in the case of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It was also reflected in India's not supporting the Belt and Road Initiative of China. Another aspect where it was very recently seen was in the Doklam standoff. So on all these issues, there is a concern that both these countries have a severe trust deficit. Now this needs to be addressed, and here the author has suggested that for addressing this, a summit level meeting is what is required. And the present context at present, to address this issue of trust deficit, there is a bureaucratic level meetings which happens between the National Security Advisor of India and his counterpart in China. So the author is advocating that instead of this bureaucratic level partnership, a summit level partnership should happen, and at that level this trust deficit needs to be redressed. So that is one issue with regards to India-China partnership. Another suggestion that the author has given is with regards to an equidistance policy. Now here you need to understand that India is wary of China-Pakistan relation, and similarly China is wary of India-US relation. Now in this regard, both these countries, India and China, should assure each other that the China-Pakistan relation will not be adversarial to India, and similarly India should assure China that the India-US relation should not be wary for China. So in this regard, both these countries should maintain an equidistance policy. If this can be ensured, then definitely both these countries can partner well, and the partnership can deepen, and it can be a strategic partnership in the interest of an Asian century is what has been advocated here. Another thing that has been analyzed is that both the countries need to cement on some common grounds. Definitely there are common grounds between India and China. For example, trade is a common ground. The realization of the Asian century is also a common ground. So on those perspectives, both these countries need to come close and cement their relationship is what has been advocated here. So these are the suggestions with regards to the India-China policy. Now coming to the second set of suggestion, which is with regards to India's soft power. Now here the author says that India has a huge potential in leveraging its soft power in the realization of an Asian century, which India has not been doing. For example, India has huge prowess in the IT sector. Another thing is that India has huge achievements in its pharmaceutical sector. India is one of the one country which is producing the cheapest drugs globally. So that is one power which India has. Another thing is that India has a high quality of skilled manpower which is providing for global innovations. For example, the Indian diaspora in US is highly innovative. So all of these are important soft power aspects of India which India should leverage, and all of these, if leveraged wisely, will ensure that the 21st century indeed becomes an Asian century. So that is one analysis. Another thing is that the author is advocating for some shifts which need to be induced. These are especially with regards to India. Now here he says that India needs to make a shift from a petitioner approach to an assertive approach. Here the author is analyzing the era of Nehru, where India was largely, the author says, a petitioner. And this mindset of India needs to change, and India now needs to not request Western countries and powerful countries like the US. Rather, India needs to be much more assertive. This is what has been advocated. Another thing which has been advocated is that India should shift its focus from Western countries like the US and the UK or other European countries and focus much more on its Eastern neighbors, which is for instance the ASEAN. So definitely if India does this, then this century will become an Asian century. Another thing is that India needs to shift its focus from land to an ocean centric policy. Now at present, India has largely focused on its land territories, especially with regards to Pakistan and terrorism emanating from the western borders of India. Now this needs to be shifted to the ocean centric policy of India, because the 21st century is a century of focus on oceans. So that is one important analysis, that India needs to make this shift. So that is important here. Another thing is with regards to a passive to an active policy is what has been advocated, that initially India is largely a passive state. For instance, the Belt and Road Initiative by China is there, so India is largely criticizing that initiative. So the author is making an analysis that India is not actively making an initiative to counter the Belt and Road Initiative, and rather India is only criticizing and only responding to such policies. So when the country makes a shift in its policy and becomes an active countering power to China, in that scenario also a balance can be achieved, and in that scenario again an Asian century is something that can be realized. So this is the entire analysis of this article. Indeed, this is an important article. The Asian century is a common term in diplomacy now, and a question I am expecting in UPSC this year. So coming to the next topic, these are two articles which I have clubbed together in the discussion. Now previously also we have discussed many articles on the ASEAN, but some new points have been raised here. So that is why we shall be discussing the ASEAN. The context is obvious. It is repetitive. The 10 ASEAN leaders have been invited as Republic Day chief guests, and in that respect definitely India-ASEAN relationship is important. Also 2017 was the year marking 25 years of relationship between India and the ASEAN. So that is the context. Now coming to the analysis that has been drawn in these two articles, the first issue that has been raised is that of the Act East policy. Now you need to understand that the Act East policy is a step above the Look East policy of the government prior to the NDA government, the present NDA government. Before that it was the Look East policy. Now definitely if there is a shift from Look East to Act East, so in that regard a strong relation with the ASEAN is something that is indeed warranted, and it is no more a choice for the leaders, and it is of utmost importance that a strategic economic relation is built with the ASEAN to realize the Act East policy. So that is the first analysis that has been made. Another issue is that with regards to trade. Now this is an important analysis. Here you need to understand that India's trade with the ASEAN is at present $76.53 billion only, as compared to China, which is $452.2 billion. Now this is nearly 6 times the trade that India has with the ASEAN. So definitely in this perspective, it is often criticized that India has been failing to meet its full economic potential with the ASEAN. This is the criticism which is coming from the end of the ASEAN countries, and India on the countering is also criticizing the ASEAN, because India says that India has been adversely impacted by the economic association with ASEAN, because this association has largely been limited to goods and not to services, and India has a strength with the services, especially with regards to its IT services. The ASEAN countries are unwilling to recognize the degrees which the Indian professionals have. So in that regard, India is unable to leverage the benefits of the India-ASEAN relationship. So that is one analysis here. Also these are the concerns which India is raising at the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. So these concerns are definitely important, and these need to be addressed both in the favor of the ASEAN as well as India's genuine concerns need to be addressed. So that is one analysis here. Another thing that has been discussed is with regards to an infrastructure. Now India and ASEAN are participating for infrastructure development in the region. First and foremost is the India-Myanmar-Thailand trilateral highway. This highway has been shown here in the map. Now, this highway is expected to go to other countries also, like it is expected that it will be extended to Laos and Vietnam. Another extension is being envisaged to Cambodia and also to Malaysia. So, definitely there is a huge scope for this infrastructure development in this regard. Another thing is, another project that has been analyzed is the Kaladan multimodal project. Now, the Kaladan multimodal project starts from Kolkata in India. Then it goes to the Sitwe port in Myanmar, in the Rakhine province of Myanmar. This is also the province where the Rohingya issue is at peak. So that is the importance of this region. Now from here, a river, which is the Kaladan River, the Kaladan River takes it to another area which is known as the Palitwa region, and from this Palitwa region this project again continues to the Mizoram district of India. So this is a very, very vital project because it connects India to, first and foremost, ASEAN to India back again, and also it provides a shorter route for connecting Kolkata to Mizoram. So definitely this is an important project. But the issue with regards to these infrastructure projects is that despite several commitments, these projects are highly delayed. And this problem of delay is something that is not a scenario with the projects which China has implemented in the Asian countries. So definitely when it is compared to China, India needs to increase its abilities, and India needs to fast track these infrastructure projects to finally realize the benefits of the ASEAN. So that is one analysis here. Another very, very important point, which is a new point in these articles, is that how can India be a bridge between South Asia and Southeast Asia? Now, previously, all the editorials have largely seen the question of South Asia and Southeast Asia as one of competition. It is largely viewed that India will have to decide whether it needs to build better, stronger relation with South Asia or Southeast Asia. But this is a de novo point, so that is the relevance of this. Now, these infrastructure projects, India can leverage these infrastructure projects to its South Asian neighbors also. For instance, this trilateral highway can be extended from northeastern India to Bhutan also. It can be extended to Nepal also. So if India follows this policy, then definitely India can act as a successful bridge between South Asia and Southeast Asia, is what has been advocated, and this is an argument which can be replicated in your answers. Now, another important analysis is with regards to similar challenges for the India as well as ASEAN countries. Now, this is important. First and foremost, the similar challenges with regards to an assertive China. Another similar challenges with regards to issues like climate change is an important arena. Another thing is with regards to some economic issues, also both the countries face similar challenges. For example, there is a disruption to the traditional employment structure in both these areas, both these zones, that is India as well as the ASEAN. There is a loss of job at the behest of the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, which is a highly digital industrial revolution, which is characterized by artificial intelligence, robotics, Internet of Things, 3D printing. So in this regard, both the countries are facing similar challenges. So in that regard, I've been calling ASEAN as a country. Both the zones are facing similar challenges. So definitely there is a scope for greater partnership in this regard. So that is what has been analyzed in these editorials. Another issue is with regards to rise of China. We have previously also in many articles discussed that both these areas have a fear of a rising China. Both are being oppressed by this rising dominance of China. For example, the ASEAN is impacted by China's rise in the South China Sea, and India is impacted by China's rise in the Indian Ocean. So definitely if both these units collaborate with each other, then in that regard both can ensure a balance to this rise of China. So that is one analysis. Another thing is with regards to maritime security. Definitely, maritime security is a prime concern for all these countries, and in this regard, there is a scope for cooperation. There is a fact that has been given which is important. That is, the recently Simbex is a military exercise that took place between India and Singapore. This was a military exercise between the Indian Navy as well as the Singapore Navy. So such kind of military exercises should be repeated and more of them should be conducted. This is what has been analyzed. Another thing is with regards to some non-traditional risks. For example, the Delhi Declaration that was recently mooted by both these groups. In that regard, also, the issue of terrorism was something that was raised. Also, the issue of human trafficking is vital to both these zones. Another thing is that of cybercrime is something that is of utmost importance. Another thing, as I mentioned before, also, this is the golden triangle. This is the hotspot of drug trafficking. So definitely all of this is an important analysis for both India and ASEAN. Another thing is with regards to the socio-cultural ties. Now, in this regard, an analysis has been given of the Indian diaspora, which constitutes a huge part in ASEAN. Another thing is with regards to a liking for the Bollywood films in Asian countries, and promoting people to people links is something that is vital to India-ASEAN relations. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is with regards to the Western economies. Now, again, this is a de novo analysis, and this is something important. Now, you need to know that all the Western economies, be it the US or even the UK, or for that matter, the entire European Union, there is a tendency in the Western economies to adopt more protectionist approach. Now, this is something that is harming both India as well as the ASEAN, and in this regard, it is wise that India as well as ASEAN should not look towards the Western countries for export of their goods. Rather, they should ensure that efficient markets and robust markets are set up within Asia itself, so that they are not very much dependent on Western economies. So this is a relevant analysis here. Another thing is with regards to the tensions between global powers. Now, the global powers are largely America, that is the US, then it is Russia and China. There is a huge amount of stress between these powers. This was recently also seen in the neighborhood of Asia itself, in the context of the Korean Peninsula. So definitely in this regard, it is of utmost importance that these non-aligned nations, all the Asian countries as well as India, are largely non-aligned. So if these non-aligned nations form a group of their own, then definitely they will have a huge leverage with themselves. It will be a huge advantage to the entire region. So that is the analysis with regards to ASEAN. Now, final opinion is what has been given is that both the Southeast Asia as well as South Asia are at a critical juncture of geopolitics, and therefore a symbiotic relation between South Asia and Southeast Asia is indeed something that is much required, much warranted. So that is the final opinion in this regard. Definitely ASEAN is of utmost importance this year. So that is the relevance of this particular editorial. Now coming to the next article, the oil risk. The opinion is that India needs to expedite steps that can help minimize the impact of higher oil prices. So as obvious, the context of this article is of the rising global oil prices. Now these prices are at a 4-year high, and therefore India is faced with the economic risks of an expensive energy. Now, what are the issues that are important in this particular editorial? First and foremost is with regards to the OPEC cartelization. Now, first and foremost, you need to know about the OPEC. The OPEC is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. Now, these countries have often had a policy of cartelization, where what these countries do is that whenever there is a fall in the oil prices, they have a tendency to control the supply of oil stocks, and they restrict the production of oil, and this creates an artificial shortage, and this causes a price rise. So this issue is something that is important in the global oil markets. So that is what is important in this regard. Another analysis is with regard to the shale gas. Now the shale gas is a natural gas which is obtained from the shale. Shale is a form of a sedimentary rock. It is the most common form of sedimentary rock. Now the shale gas is largely which has been explored in the US, and this is a very commonly available resource, but its extraction is something that is a cost intensive process. So this is something important. Even India has huge reserves of shale gas, but India has not been successful in retrieving these reserves. So that is an analysis that because the US has been successful in retrieving its shale gas resources, in that regard the US has really reduced its import of oil from the OPEC countries. In that regard, the oil prices had largely fallen. So that is the entire cause for falling oil prices. Now another thing is with regards to weakening of dollar. Now it is said that the prices of oil are rising because the dollar is weakening. Now why is the dollar weakening? The dollar is weakening because of the quantitative easing policies of the US. Now in this, what is important for you to understand is that the global oil prices is something that India has no control upon, and not only that, they are not following healthy market practices, and it is dependent upon sometimes unethical practices like this OPEC cartelization, and even it's excessive depending on the dollar. And here also the US does not adopt a very ethical and a moral role. It is very much US centric, and it does not consider the impact of their policies on the global markets. So that is an analysis is what is relevant for you to understand. Another thing is that the domestic fuel prices definitely are on a rise because of the rising global oil prices, and this is in the backdrop of the dynamic daily pricing policy. The fuel prices in the country have been deregulated, and in that regard the prices are definitely going to fluctuate. So that is one analysis. Another thing is that the government in this regard is faced with a challenge of either subsidizing the high prices, because a rise in the fuel prices will not only directly impact the rise of increase in the diesel and petrol prices, this will have a cascading effect on other products. For example, if transportation is going to become expensive, then all the food products will increase, the cost of all the food products will increase. So this will generally have an inflation in the country. So that is what has been analyzed. So in this regard, the government can have a populist measure like a subsidy, or it can bring about some tax reforms in the petroleum sector. So the advocacy that the editorial is making, that the government should not go for subsidies, but rather should relax some taxes on petrols or diesel. So that is what has been advocated here. Another issue is that if the prices are rising, then the import bill of the government is going to rise, and this is going to impact the fiscal prudence of the country, especially at the time when the fiscal limits of the country have already been stretched. So that is one important analysis. Another thing is with regards to the hydrocarbon exploration policy of India. Now in this continuous scenario where the global oil prices are something that are not stable, and as I mentioned, they are dependent on a very uncertain environment. They're dependent upon the OPEC, they're dependent upon the dollar. In that regard, what is of utmost importance is that India should give a push to its hydrocarbon exploration policy, and the reserves within the country is something that need to be explored widely. So that is one analysis which has been brought about. Another thing is with regards to the China model. Now China has encouraged its petroleum oil exploring companies to buy oil fields in foreign countries and to explore there. So this kind of a model even India should adopt. India should favor that the ONGC Videsh Limited should buy more and more reserves and ensure more oil extraction on its own. So becoming self-centered, self-reliant is the ultimately the best hedge, is what has been opinionated in this particular editorial. So that is the entire analysis, and that is the entire importance of this entire issue. So before we finish, some piece of information: we are starting a UPSC prelims cum mains classes from the 28th of January 2018. So it shall be covering all the basics. I would request all interested candidates to get in touch with us. These are our contact details and this is our phone number. So on that note, we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you tomorrow.